In recent years, I've started to notice something. It's something which doesn't affect every movie that comes out, but something which has crept its way into mainstream Hollywood blockbusters. And it's this. Mainstream films are handicapping meaningful and sincere scenes with forced jokes that rob the scene of its weight. This is an issue you mainly find in Marvel superhero films. There will be an action scene or a scene with dialogue, something dramatic and serious. Tension will escalate, something happens, maybe even a character death. There's a slight pause, and then someone will come up with a quip to alleviate the tension. It was popularized by Joss Whedon's The Avengers, a movie in which there are genuine stakes. The world is under attack after all, but that doesn't stop a few comedic lines sprinkled here and there throughout the film. I think it worked very well in this movie, but it seems to have seeped its way into further installments of the superhero franchise and other movies. The sequel, Age of Ultron, was littered with so many quips from its main cast that one of the prominent complaints of the film was that the characters no longer had any representative elements of individualism. In other words, they were all the same, all jokey and punny, whereas in the first film, each had their own characteristics and traits. And you see this all the time now, and it's not just the MCU. You see it in the 2 Jurassic World movies and the 2 most recent Star Wars films, where shallow methods to inject levity into a situation punches many of the serious moments. You know what I'm talking about, there are so many examples. It's like the directors are afraid audiences won't be able to cope with a sad or serious moment for a minute and need to kill it with some humour. There's nothing wrong with a bit of comedy, of course there isn't, but when it is constantly tagged on the tail end of a serious scene, it completely ruins it. In previous blockbusters, the filmmakers knew when there were times for jokes and when there was a time to get serious with the stakes. The Mummy, for instance, the one with Brendan Fraser, is an absolute riot. It's hilarious. But when Imhotep takes a man's eyes and tongue, or when he completely devours the man later on, or when a man is driven insane by a beetle crawling around inside of him, these moments aren't treated as jokes. They don't have little quips to end the scene, and as such they retain their effectiveness in the horror they were attempting to portray. Even if you go back further to the classic age of action movies, films like Die Hard, like Predator, these films are very funny. Predator is filled to the brim with sassy one-liners as the muscle-bound badasses tear their way through the jungle and their enemies. But crucially, when the Predator shows up and kills one of their own, when it's clear there is something among them in the jungle that is a very serious threat, all the jokes go out the window. This adds gravity to the drama. I mean, watching some of the blockbusters these days, it feels insulting at times when all these jokes are shoved into scenes where they just don't fit. Why do they do it? Is it because they think audiences will be turned off by actual stakes and seriousness? Is it because they don't trust their audience? Is it because they want to emulate the Marvel movies? Because they look at Marvel and they see success and they think, alright, we'll do that as well. Because if it is that, at the very least with the Marvel films you can understand it. For one, they weave comedy into action appropriately in many cases without hampering the tone. And anyway, they're comic book movies. These kind of quips are hallmarks of typical comic book dialogue. But this trope just doesn't fit many of the films you find it in, and movies are handicapping themselves with the constant corny jokes. And many of the jokes are self-referential, especially in Jurassic World, sometimes even meta, which completely takes you out of the film. It's becoming quite formulaic and common now, to the point that if you watch a blockbuster and there's a serious moment, followed by a few seconds of silence, you know there's going to be a gag coming. You end up expecting it. And if there is a serious scene with a few seconds of silence added on and there is no gag, then ironically that scene ends up feeling awkward. Because now you've come to expect jokes at the end of these scenes. It's not an issue exclusive to superhero movies. In fact, some films like Wonder Woman stick out for avoiding this. But movies are escapism. They are often about far-fetched things and contain silly premises. But when made with skill, even the balmiest blockbuster can feel sincere and earnest. When a filmmaker adds a joke to a serious scene, you think to yourself, is it really that terrifying to get invested in the emotions of a character or a film? Does it have to end with a joke? One of the reasons I've suspected this to happen, I've no idea if this is true, but it's one of my theories, is that some directors or studio suits or whoever are afraid of being ridiculed. They're apprehensive that their films will be laughed at for trying to be serious, for trying to be sincere. They think, If I show this spandex wearing superhero having a genuinely serious moment, maybe mourning a dead person or something else serious, audiences will laugh at it and call it corny. So they add a joke for levity, trying to show us, guys listen, we know how this looks, but we're in on the joke too, see? After all, there's more risk involved in trying to make a scene serious and dramatic. If it goes wrong, it can go really bad. Take the Martha scene from Batman vs Superman. The director clearly wanted it to be an emotional moment, but it's been ridiculed to no end, and it became a popular meme on the internet. It would have been a lot easier for Batman to just throw in a little self-referential, "Yeah, that just happened," or wink at the audience with a meta, "What a coincidence, our moms have the same names," into the mix to show audiences you're in on the joke. But in not taking the risk in the first place, in feeling your movie can't be allowed to fail, they end up failing in an attempt to avoid failure. Maybe it's a passing fad that will die with the superhero genre, or maybe we need to take a step back to see the issue in its entirety. If you go back decades to those cheesy Flash Gordon serials from the 1930s, or Roger Corman sci-fi movies from the 50s, these films are exceptionally ridiculous but committed to making serious entertainment. But since movies have been around for so long, science fiction for example, initially starting off as something for kids, but then gaining credibility and critical respect, we see reinventions, deconstructions, revivals, parodies, and all manner of tinkering that results in an expectation that audiences will know that certain genres have cliches and formulas attached to them. And to get the audience emotionally invested, there are two available options. A. Make a movie that winks to the audience, telling them, "Hey, don't worry, we know this is ridiculous, but let's run with it, yeah?" Or B. Make a compelling, engrossing, original picture that knocks audiences off their feet and makes them overlook the silliness. It's not surprising that most filmmakers choose the first option. I mean, I'm not saying I want every film devoid of humour, just to be boring chunks of celluloid. But look, the original Star Wars films had jokes, but those jokes worked in universe. They were made by characters whose personalities fit to make the jokes, and they worked within the fantasy context of the film series. The new ones, however, it's like characters are from today's day and age, making 21st century jokes like the "your mum" gag that was in Star Wars The Last Jedi, and being aware of the fantastical nature of their situations. It can be quite irritating, and it is affecting a lot of films. Thankfully though, there are those who know how to balance humour and sincerity, and there are many blockbusters, like for example the Planet of the Apes trilogy, that don't succumb to this trope. Thanks for watching.